Welcome back to putting an automatic transmission into Juke. So, it's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks since I put this up, and I've been picking away behind the scenes getting the electronics set up. But we're gonna get to that in a second because I had mentioned in the last video that we had to make this fit to a Juke flex plate. It was just not gonna work out the way I wanted to after doing measurements and stuff. So what I did is this right here is a Versa flex plate that is designed for this transmission, and all MRs use the exact same crank bolt pattern, so it's gonna bolt right up. So that takes care of that issue. So let's get back to this issue. So this is my 4th revision of this. I tried originally doing the normal solenoids, so these 4 solenoids right here, control via transistors, positive side or load side transistors, just to try to keep the footprint small for when I get a circuit board for this. They just couldn't handle it, and I actually, caught one on fire. So we're gonna have to use relays. So I have these, really? It's like South Park episode out there. So I have these temporary relay setups that I use for testing, so you can just screw in wires and move stuff around. So we have that, and then this right here is actually a motor controller, because I need to send out a positive PWM signal to this solenoid, which is our line pressure control solenoid. The problem I'm having, because I've been testing this, is the shift solenoids and the line pressure solenoid only actuate when they have pressure on them. So if I hook up this to the wiring, it will click this on for a quick second, but then there's nothing to push it back, so it doesn't pulse like it's supposed to. Shift solenoids, same thing. I actually had taken this entire valve body out when Phil was here a couple days ago. Actually, if you watch the video of me doing an open downpipe on his car, when I filmed him cutting his fenders, I was actually standing here with the valve body out.
OSHA certified.
So I had the valve body out and I took the solenoids out, and if I put pressure up against one of the shift solenoids and then actuated this or activated this, it did the solenoid. So we know it works. So I know this right here is going to need some sort of pressure on the other side to pulse. Unfortunately, I can't create fluid pressure. The way I tricked this is I kind of stuck a pin into the thing to push on the end of the solenoid, and it worked every now and then. This one, I can't do that. So the only way to figure out if this is going to work is I got to put this back together and we got to put it in a car. There's not really any getting around it. It's the only way we're going to make this work. So what I'm going to do, just really quick, it's going to be disconnected. I'm going to fire this up, show you that as I upshift and downshift, the relays clicking on and off, because these have LEDs on them, which is why I like using these for testing. And then I'll show you the PWM and line pressure outputs that change with the throttle input, and with when I shift, it drops the line pressure. This right here is my test throttle. This is upshift, downshift. So I'll show you guys all of that, but this thing's gonna have to go into a car for me to find out if this works, unfortunately. There's the other issue of finding out what pressures I'm actually running. So there's no pressure sensor on these transmissions, which is insane. But luckily in the factory service manual for these, there is a pressure test port, which is that guy right there. So I gotta take that little hex screw out, figure out the thread pitch, which I'm being told is an M10 by 1, but I need to verify that because it could also be a 1/8 MPT. So I gotta take that out, and then I'm gonna have to put a pressure gauge in there, pressure sensor, sorry, hook that up to our little system here so that I can live monitor our transmission pressures, so that I can make adjustments where needed and also find out if this is working. So I guess today we're gonna try to put this on an engine and put it on a car. So before I show you testing this, I'm gonna quickly show you what I've done to the engine to get it ready to go into the car. So this here is our MR88 that we're gonna be using for this. I don't know if you've been watching all of the videos, but I recently made a turbo manifold for $100 that fit the MR engines. This is an Evo manifold I got on Amazon. It was like 89 bucks, and then some steel, welded things together, and boom, turbo manifold. This is a $100 eBay turbo for giggles. To make it work, I had to do a little spacer thing, but it's gonna work. Then we have the intake manifold. I made a video explaining how the butterfly valves work in this, and then what we were doing to modify that. And then there's this. I did a video showing how to make thread-in fuel injector bosses, or bungs, if you want to call them that. And with the hope of being able to put them into a plastic intake manifold as auxiliary fuel, so that you can leave the factory fuel system in a DI car, or make a car run completely normal until it's under boost and you need extra fuel. So that's what this is. So these are in here, like that's in there. I could probably pick this engine up by this if I wanted to. It's got, you know, this bracket I whipped together out of some angle iron I had laying around. So the injectors are squeezed down really tight with the fuel rail. We have upgraded fuel system because part of what I want to experiment with on this is I want to see on the A8 exactly how much the factory fuel rail and fuel injectors will support. I also have something I'm doing for the oil drain, which I got to do a video explaining, but this is going to be our oil drain. It's a complete thread-in piece, but you do have to change the upper oil pan to a Juke one, which really isn't that hard, to be honest. You can do it on a car if you take your time. So that's the engine we're going to be using and all the things that we've done to it. All right, so I have the unit powered up. These are our shift solenoids and then our overrun and torque converter lockup solenoids. And you'll notice that as I upshift, so now we're in gear 2, gear 3, gear 4, overdrive, and then down, 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 down. Okay. Now, if we look here, we can see our line pressure value, and I'm going to upshift, and you're going to see that drop. It drops for a second, and then comes back up. That's essentially our shift time. We're going to downshift, just like that. And as I turn our throttle, our fake throttle here, you can see the line pressure value change. So that's how that works. Again, can't really demonstrate it working in here without pressure. Can't even really confirm that this right here is the only thing I don't know if it works. This stuff right here, these are solenoids that just turn on and off. That's pretty straightforward. That I know is gonna work. It's this one right here that I don't know is gonna work. And if for some reason this doesn't work, even with this in the car, I don't need to get to that. And if I did need to get to it, it's just taking the pan off. Like that's it over there, like not a big deal. So I'm going to make some room, and then I'm gonna put the pan back on this, and we're gonna get this over to the engine, get the torque converter on it, flex plate on the engine, and get this thing bolted together. I'll carry that by myself. According to Google, that's 165 pounds. Quite proud of myself. So, silly me, didn't need to order a flex plate because the flex plate I was trying was off a Juke, thinking the one off of the Sentra, which is what this came out of, would be the same as the Juke one. It's not. It's the exact same flex plate, vice versa. So, that's fun. I had to make torque converter bolts. So I just took some bolts I had that were the right pitch and everything, ground them down. I already checked that they're gonna sit flush with the ring gear, so they're not gonna hit anything. So now we get to put the transmission on this thing. So you get to the point in a project, especially one that nobody's done before, where you're like, wow, this might actually work. So there's torque converter bolt. That is a automatic transmission on an MR-A8, which means that automatic transmission would also fit a Juke engine. So this might actually work. The only thing that I am concerned about is that pressure solenoid, because I can't test it. But I'm gonna put the rest of the bolts in this transmission, and then I think we're gonna put it in a car. The only thing I don't have is a transmission mount because I need to see where that ends up to see if we can use the mount on the frame side of the Juke. And then I can just make something bolt up to it just to get it working for now. But I'm gonna put some more bolts in here, and then I think we're gonna put this in a car. Okay, that went easy. Don't ever jack your Juke up like that. Don't ever jack your Juke up like that. I am I was gonna say professional, but you know. All right, so it's in, obviously. Surprising amount of room around that turbo manifold, which is exciting. But anyway, we gotta sort this out now, which is the transmission mount. So I can make something, utilize, you know, the polyurethane bushing in here that I made, and we can utilize this, which means whatever I make down there can be just solid steel. So that way it's not solid welded, so it's not vibrating my teeth out while we're testing this. So that's good. It fits quite nicely. I was wondering if the subframe was going to be an issue, because the Versa that this is in doesn't have a full subframe, it has a half subframe, which the engine is sitting fairly level right now, so we're only going to be able to lift it up a little bit, and it is resting on there and sitting almost level, so we might have to lift it so it's a little higher over here just to avoid contact with the subframe if that becomes an issue. I don't think it's going to be an issue. But what I'm going to do is, however I do this through hole here, I'll just make it so I can adjust the height by just tightening or loosening whatever I use there. We're not about to put, you know, 100,000 miles in this thing, so I'm not worried about something like that vibrating loose. Okay, so that's the easy part of putting this in here. I now have to do my wiring. Now, I have these injector clips on here, which obviously are not how the factory ones look. So what I'm going to have to do is get adapters for these. I have new connectors of these because we're gonna have to make a sub harness to run to the fuel tech to run the second set of injectors. And we'll just jank run it just so that it works. We're not worried about it looking pretty. The rest of the harness should work except for the crank position sensor. Now we can't use the factory crank position sensor on this application because we don't have the cut teeth on the cam wheel, so I have to run the crank sensor. So I don't want to cut open the wiring to do that, so I'm going to see if somebody sells an adapter somewhere. If not, I will just pin into my connector and just make a harness that goes over there, and then I'll just tape the crap out of it, because again, this isn't permanent, this is just for testing. I can tape the crap out of the connector to make sure the pins don't fall out if we have to do that, which again, this is not going to be a permanent thing yet. The other issue that we have to figure out that I don't know how I'm going to do it is the shift selector. Now obviously the shift linkages end about right here from the manual transmission. So either I'm going to have to find a way to mount. Sorry, put my noise if there is any. I'm gonna have to find a way to either mount this and then extend it, or I'm gonna have to get creative with some other kind of linkage in there. And we also have to try test fitting these axles too. I can't forget about that. But I am really surprised by how much room there is behind that manifold. That's cool. I still gotta add a wastegate to that. We're quite a ways away from starting this thing up. So my phone died, which I'm recording this on, and my new camera, I can't get it to focus. So everything's in here. Intake manifold, turbo, A couple of issues we're running into. So let's do issues first and then good things after that. This LS alternator conversion isn't fitting. I think I have a solution for it, which I'm just going to modify the connector so it's super low profile because it's just hitting right here. So got to deal with that. Next issue we have to deal with is the vacuum block. We have it to a -8 because race car, so I'll have to get a -8 to barb so that we can connect this to the intake manifold. So we got to sort that out. I had mentioned, I think the connectors were wrong for the injectors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the primary injector connectors go up to here because these are actually the injectors from the race car. They'll connect them there. And then I have the pigtails here. So I'll just make the secondary injectors those ones, and the fuel tech, you can sort that out, so that's not a big deal. You'll notice that there's a transmission mount, so this is part of the good stuff. So that is an ARP head stud, just a used one I had laying around that I keep for spares. I plasma cut this plate out really quick, drilled a hole, put a nut on the other side of the head stud, you can see it in there, and that's in there pretty good. There's no lower torque mileage, so I just moved that up a lot. So that solves that problem. So that's good. The turbo is good. I'm gonna get a heat wrap or something, or a heat shield to put here and just strap everything back as far as I can. Oil feed line, I have that already sorted out. I said to put it on. Gotta make an oil drain line. It's gonna be really easy. This I'm gonna have to clock again. So, stupid me forgetting about the intake plenums. So I have to make intercooler piping for this because we don't want it to go just turbo to intake because it's going to get really hot. So I'm going to basically put the intercooler there, and then we'll just run a pipe over to there and then a pipe off there to our throttle body. It's going to be janky. As long as it seals up, that's all we care about. I have a small V-port blow-off valve we can use for that. That way I can retain my 1/4-inch vacuum tubing that I've been using. You'll notice that we have a pressure sensor here. I managed to get a 1/8 MPT sensor in, obviously. This is actually our clutch pressure sensor, since we're not going to be needing it. So I'm just going to reroute the wiring into there, and then we have our line pressure sensor right there. This is, I think, 1,000 PSI sensor, which is way overkill because the transmission's max, I think, is 300 PSI, something like that. So we have that. I need to look up what this sensor is. It'd be really funny if that was a pressure sensor, because it probably is, but this is easier. So we have that sorted out. I need to get some sort of transmission cooler. We're definitely going to need one of those. I'll just get a cheapo one. Just something is better than nothing. I need to urethane this connector with the wiring in it so that they don't come out, or RTV works too. It's like a permanent connector type deal, and I need to do the same thing here. I need to just throw in some pinned wires like this and then cap that off so that I can use that. The cooling system, we're just going to use the race car one. It's more than enough. The coolant lines that we usually run to the turbo, which is these ones right here, we'll just loop those so we don't need them. So there's quite a bit to do, but there's also not a lot to do, if that makes sense. So part of me is even thinking get it running with the turbo on there but not hooked up so we can figure out the transmission thing. But then part of me is like, well, before we do that, let's get everything working, because even if this transmission doesn't work or I can't get it to work, I'm going to put a manual in there and we're going to see how much power these A8s can take before they explode. 100%. So we are right there. There's really not a whole lot left to do. I'm going to crank out everything I can tomorrow. Oh, the other issue I got to figure out is getting fuel to here. Now we're not going to be making 700 horsepower, so we don't need the big fuel rail off of the race car with the the -8 going into it. I believe I have 2 of the fittings to go on here, and then if I can get a Y connection, we can just run an 8 a.m. over this and hook it up, and that'll take care of that. that's a fairly easy issue to solve. Somebody who I had sent pictures of this auxiliary fuel rail to had mentioned worrying about the height. So on a Sentra, that might be an issue, but on the Juke, it's definitely not. Where this is sitting isn't even as tall as what that is when it's normally installed. Like there's like boatloads of room on a Juke because the hood is so bubble shaped. On a Sentra, what you would probably end up having to do is take this, and you can actually turn this around if you just snip off that little stopper right there. Spin this around so it's facing that way, and then actually just have the injectors here facing the runners. Is probably what you would have to do on a Sentra, which isn't a big deal. I did it this way just because it was the easiest way to do it. I can get to it for testing. So, you know, there's obviously more than one way to do everything. So that's going to be it for this video. The sun is setting. I'm going to get back on this probably tomorrow. I'm going to make a list of what I need to order up, see what I can get my hands on. But I believe this thing should be running in the next week on this transmission. I got to finish tuning that car. That's a whole separate thing. The shift linkage too. Maybe I'll see if I can find a Versa shift linkage and just like put it in the cabin and manually do it. Cool.
Like and subscribe, guys.